So the child's ability to say that this is what I think, it's so refreshing to hear, because otherwise our go-to source is just, doing some literature review or, talking to other researchers who have done something similar. And so we kind of do this guesswork based on whatever data we have access to, and we miss out on that first person perspective. You can do like card sorting for organizing relevant ideas. So that could be one way to co-create with kids, that listing all the features that they like, listing the features that they wish or they observed in another game or another application that they love. And then you can ask them to kind of rank it or group it. And you'll be surprised, even like 6 to 7 year olds do an excellent job at card sorting. You can also consider just drawing ideas, incorporate art if you can, that have like a brainstorming session, like just let the kids go nuts, like draw anything you imagine, like whatever your research theme is, ask them to draw ideas for that. And most ideas will be completely wild, imaginary. You can't directly prototype based on that, but it will give you some amazing fresh ideas. You can also prototype with construction toys or found materials, so they can be creative and take that stressor away from like doing some like heavy researchy thing. And it might just feel like play, very natural for them. Now maps. So with adults, we have like so many different maps: journey map, experience map, empathy maps. For children, I try to simplify it. I try to combine all the insights that I need to know. And I see this all the time in like experience map or empathy maps. People add these like emojis of like, oh, the child rated, frowny emoji, child was happy at this point, smiley emoji. But then how do you know? Did you like do video observations and then capture that they were happy at this point, or you're just guessing? And unfortunately, the answer is most people just put this fancy graph in their portfolio, and it's totally based on guesswork. It's not based on an interview transcript. It's not based on video observation. So that is what we need to address, because adults can tell you that this was my pain point. This is what frustrated me the most during this journey. Children may not be able to do that. So instead of just guessing, this made them frustrated, ask them, clarify that. So this is like the typical empathy map, customer journey map, experience map, service blueprint. For kids, I'll show like a very simple example, because it differs. Like this is not a formula or template that I'm showing you. This is just an example of mapping can look different in different projects contexts. So the most important part to ask children is to understand what was their process in whatever journey, like whether it's onboarding or changing the settings, whatever the process, the journey that you're looking at, what was their thought process behind it. You can observe the process in a video, and you can then pair the video observations with interview or think alouds to clarify their reasoning. Children over the age of 10 do really well in think alouds, and you'll be surprised like how well they're able to articulate. But for younger kids, again, you'll need more prompts and clarification. Yeah, and for children ages 10 and up, you can even consider asking them to map their own journey. You'll be surprised to know I actually shared like a Miro mind mapping link with like 10-year-olds. They had not used Miro before. I spent like 10 minutes to explain them how things work, and they were on it. They got it. Like 10-year-olds are 10 and up. They're really, really smart. Like I don't think I was licking dirt at that age. So I'm just amazed what these kids can do. But yeah, they were able to create their own journey maps. Like they were able to document their process, and they were able to create the chart for me. And that was so amazing, because then I don't have to guess and I don't have to misinterpret anything. I gave them the agency to express their own journey. And for younger children, you can consider co-creating the map using arts and crafts. So it doesn't have to be in a software. You can even take like Post-its and take a thread and ask them that, oh, so you did this first. Tell me what you did next. And then kind of co-create like a tangible version of the journey map with them. Now here's an example. This was for 14 to 16-year-olds an activity with Lily. It's a small microcontroller that you can sew in fabrics. And so the goal was to help them design an LED bookmark. Like the eyes of the character and the bookmark light up, so you can use it as a nightlight. And so before they did that, I created like a augmented reality art. So they were given a card with all the instructions of how to put this bookmark together. And if they scanned it with a device, they could see it animated and it will give them instructions. So like they were given this sheet of paper, essentially. It had like a Twinklebot character. It showed where to place the battery and the lily pad and how to put it together. And if you scan it, it will give you instructions on how to sew, where to start, which parts to connect to what, things like that. And so then the kids were starting to like draw out of the bookmark using felt and, following the instructions to put it together. So for this, the first phase for me was the orientation, where they watched the AR instructions. Then they started designing, they gathered the supplies, they sketched the layout, they started assembling. And then they were troubleshooting. They were troubleshooting with me first as the facilitator, then they started troubleshooting independently. And so for me, like, as you can see, this does not look like any of the traditional journey maps that we see. And that's what I want to stress, that even for grown-ups, I think we need to stop, like, even though I have a PhD and come from an academic background, I think we need to stop just sticking with like one way of doing a journey map. It is essentially you're capturing the journey around the parameters that matter to your research. It's not like capture everything there is, about capturing the process of what matters to you depending on your research questions. So in this case, I was simply focusing on the maker activity. And so just this like broad level process was enough for my purpose. If my research was about socio-emotional learning, I would be focusing so much more on the emotional responses of children throughout these activities, right? So that journey map, empathy map could have looked completely different. So now the question is, what if we were to map a children's journey across a framework? Because if you read any popular early childhood education or K-12 education research, there are just so many frameworks that, a 10-step framework to help children get excited about math, or 5-step, or like, like the design thinking model, like the same 5 hexagons that you see everywhere, or the ADDIE model, or whatever model, popular model that you want to study. So how can we incorporate that as part of the journey map? So here's an example. This was my own framework for transmedia making. Transmedia making is just using media to inspire some kind of maker activity. And so I had designed this. You don't need to, like, I don't want to explain it too much, and I don't think it's relevant. So I'm not going to self-promote and say, hey, learn about my framework. But just imagine any framework with 5 or 6 or whatever number of steps. And then we'll try to, instead of in the previous example where we were looking at, the orientation, design, troubleshoot, just imagine the steps of the framework are parts of the journey map, right? So here we have 5 parts of the framework. And here I just created a 5-part chart. And again, like, it may look really unnecessarily complex to look at. So I just highlighted the parts that we are concerned about now in context of this presentation, where I'm tracking the feelings, experiences, and expectations of children while they were watching the media and while they were engaging in some sort of maker activity. So like they were familiar with the show that they were watching. So that was their experience. They were feeling happy. And then I'm basing these emojis on video observation. So I have proof that, yeah, at this point they were happy. And I also interviewed them. So I asked them that, as you were watching that show, how did that make you feel? And so I wasn't like making information up. I was connecting everything with data points. While the maker activities were going on, again, they were happy because there were some structured activities, they were given some templates that they could follow to create something. And they also had a lot of choices, and they wished that there were more loose-ended kind of, and again, this came up in the interview, so I'm not guessing, I'm basing it on actually asking children. Now, how can we use mapping of the environments for better UX? And so I'll explain what mapping environments means here. So Keith Sawyer is a very famous researcher in education. And in the Cambridge Handbook of Learning Sciences, he had this section where he talked about holistic view of learning environments. So usually we go to school and we move from one grade to the next grade to the next grade, right? And so this movement is just vertical movement. So we only look at learning in the vertical sense, right? But in real life, we learn horizontally as well. So we learn something at school, then we come back home, we might apply some of that learning there. Maybe we visit our grandparents, we're applying learning there. We're visiting our friends, we're applying learning there. We're going to the playground, in the nature, so many different settings that we move through during the day. And we are taking inspiration and ideas from one place and applying them to the other, right? And it depends, our learning also depends on what kind of resources that we have, what was the environment like, and what kind of people were there to support us in our learning experiences. If you had a grandparent who was always unpacking new information for you, you have this additional resource of a person in your life that facilitates your learning. So according to Sawyer, there were some elements that constitute a learning environment, which is the people, like the teachers, learners, others, like grandparents in the example I just technology in the environment, not just like devices, but technology can mean a lot of other things. The architecture and the physical layout of the room and the objects in it, and the social and cultural environment. So according to him, all of these factors combined are considered an environment. So we can organize it nicely in a chart that, a child at home, at school, and in other places, what are the people, technologies, architecture, and culture, and ultimately, what are they learning in these individual spaces? So once we understand the opportunities for learning, and you might think that this chart will look the same for each child, but no, like it looks completely different. So for older children, I would kind of ask them to fill it out on their own. Like at home, who are the people in your environment? And school, who are the people in your environment, right? But younger kids, they might not understand this chart. So I created like a template for them. Here's an example. And I asked them to just like draw the most important people, technologies, whatever learning activities you're doing within homeschool and other places. And then there's always like a teacher or facilitator helping them understand like what to draw. And then here you can see like the child has like labeled Chromebook, like a tablet, and there's a dog playing, there's a projector in class, like so many different things. And this activity looks different for different kids. And then as a researcher, we start like adding, like interpreting some of that, like what were the devices that this child had access to, what were the activities that this child was doing. And this is just a quick example, like there can be like 10, 12 different tags based on what they draw, and we layer it with their interview. So don't just leave it to the drawing. We also interview them for like follow-up, like, can you explain, like not everyone labels what they draw. So sometimes it's hard to make like, what does this drawing even mean, right? So we need to always follow it up with interviews. Okay, now LX design, for this new hipster term, LX design. A lot of people, so on my LinkedIn, it says learning experience designer. And every once in a while, I get this question that, oh, it's the same as e-learning. Oh, it's the same as instructional design. Why are you just like repackaging yourself? And so that happened when UX design was new, because until then, everyone was like a cognitive behavioral scientist or an HCI person or like just a behavior psychologist, and suddenly they were like, why do you need this UX term? Behavioral psychologists do the same thing. but it was a different flavor. And so learning experience design is a different flavor. And here's how. So for user experience, the lens you use are user experience theories, the HCI theories. For learning experience lens, you're using the learning theories, educational theories. And for design, you're using design theories. So when you design learning experiences for children, you look through all of these three lenses. So it's not just about UX anymore. It is also about the learning or the education and the design. So that's how it's different. So there is an overlap for sure, and it is a little bit of repackaging, but there are also additional lenses that we are looking through. And so learning experiences for children can be so diverse. It could be the traditional course, apps, and websites, but it can also be AR, VR experiences or any new technology. Just a second. It could also be museum exhibits, art exhibits, or other experiential spaces. It could be toys, games, devices, books, right? So you don't have to think in terms of traditional, what is something I can wireframe in Figma? You know, there can be products that do not involve wireframes. It can involve other types of experiences. So the focus is on the word experience and not wireframing or prototyping or in the traditional sense. It could be activity kits and kid-friendly materials. And then again, we are using all three lenses, and it can take many forms. Now, some ethics for conducting UX research with kids. Always get consent from the caregivers and then also from the child, even if their parents have consented. Get the approval from all gatekeepers. For example, if you're interviewing in the school, get the approval from the principal, teacher, whoever else is involved, like even at the school district level if you need to. Remove all identifiers when you're presenting the information at a conference or in a talk like this. As you notice, like I covered the faces of the children, and this child is just like a stock footage, so I don't have to cover. But yeah, you remove all the identifiers, including name, blurring the faces, any like badge or any information that might give away who they are. If they're uncomfortable at any point, you have to pause recording ASAP, no matter whether they consented, no matter if their parents consented. Don't just power through because it's a research that you are, like maybe it's like a grant funded research and you are in desperate need of data. And so you kind of like, it's okay, don't worry, let's continue. You can't do that. If the child is uncomfortable, pause ASAP, stop ASAP. And always be gentle and kind, always. And kids can be difficult. They can test your patience for sure, especially when they're other people's kids and you have no authority over them. But you still have to be gentle and kind in the whole process. This is a big one. Don't manipulate kids to get the data that you want. This happens especially in gaming. One of the reasons why I pursued PhD after working in the gaming industry for a while is I kind of felt like researchers were invited after the fact just to prove things. That, we need information on like how amazing this game is so that we can, then sell it as a marketing piece. That, 80% of the children who played this game loved it. Or they saw an improvement in their math skills, and everyone has to learn about coding now. So like our toy robot is the best. And so they invited researchers at the end of research instead of at the beginning. So I was like, okay, I need to get a PhD now because this is not the right way. But even without getting a degree, I think that's the heart of the problem, that we shouldn't manipulate kids to get whatever information that we need. And we need to remove all guesswork, always tie it back to some data point. And if you're not clear, just ask the children directly, what did they mean by this, instead of guessing. And so in summary, UX research for children is layered and holistic. We don't rely on one data point, we always combine information to make sense. We use multiple sources of information to generate holistic insights. We empower children with co-creation, and we thoughtfully customize the UX research methods to the children's context. And so that is it from me, and we are open for Q&A.
Yeah, hello. I think that was really insightful and wonderful. I think you covered so many things, not only UX process, but how you modify it for children's and kids. So yes, so there are already some questions here. So in chat, so I will read out. I have a few questions from my side also. So we'll try to not just quickly. So one minute, we have one question from like okay, Abhijay is asking if we ask for reasoning behind play choice, don't you think they will struggle to tell about it? We can always ask leading questions. So there should not be a we are creating biases in that. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so again, a child is such a wide term. Children at each age range have completely different developmental milestones. So if you ask children 10 and up about like, can you explain why you made this choice? They're more self-aware, and they have better insights into why they're making certain choices. And this is just developmental science. And so as researchers, we kind of leverage that. So we ask those kind of questions to children who are capable of articulating themselves. And for younger children, that's why I said that we involve the caregivers and educators who can help us unpack why they may have made a certain choice.
Right.
Because, like you said, the child may not be aware. And then, of course, so we try not to ask leading questions. So we practice our questions ahead of time. Usually there's an entire research team to make sure your questions are not leading. So you can recruit other researchers to kind of remove that bias from your questions before you actually ask them.
Right. Right. And I think that is a correct approach also, right? Because these are children, not adults. Right.
Right.
So we have one more question from like how can differentiate or understanding UX design and UX design? Oh, sorry, LX design and UX design.
Right. So there's like a popular website called of Ed, like user experience of education, and essentially a lot of people believe in that philosophy. I just feel like it's more convenient to not always refer to learners as users, because we're not just concerned about the usage experience, but the learning experience, right? We're focusing on what was the takeaway in terms of learning. And in that sense, it's we are not just studying usability, we're also exploring the educational value. And that is the focus of learning experience.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's one question from my side, which is like, so maybe you have deal with so many now children. You are in a game design, and so how, as a UX designer, when you start to take this journey, what are the first challenge you see? Because the traditional UX and you move on this thing. So what motivates you first thing to take? Because there are few people will go to specialize in this thing, and that we have done a PhD and everything. That was very wonderful. And what motivate and what basically challenge that UX design, because typically we have a UX designer who they have a traditional learning in HCI or design thinking. They have this background, and how what is advice in that?
I think there needs to be a better collaboration between the design and research team. What happens is that, UX researchers, UX generally is so hot for the last 5-10 years. Like anyone with any background, chemistry, biology, theology, whatever, they're now into UX. So what happens is many times the UX researchers come from a non-design background, and they are only experts of research. And the designers have very little experience with research. So when the UX research team spits out the findings of whatever research they did, they don't know how to translate it for designers. How does this finding becomes an action item for the design team? That has been the challenge. Sometimes what happens is people like me, there are many of us who come from both these worlds, who understand design and research. And so these are the people who kind of advocate for each other that, hey, let's interpret this finding. For example, one of the findings for a game was if it's like a card sorting, a digital experience of card sorting, it might get really chaotic and overwhelming for kids. So maybe after every 5 or 6 cards, there should be a next button. So they can swipe through and only look at 6 options at a time. And if that is the finding, then it's a very clear action item for the design team that, okay, we only put 6 items at a time, so it's not overwhelming. But sometimes the findings will be very vague, that, kids feel overwhelmed. Okay, because of what? And how can we use it in design, right? So it's just a matter of communication between the design and research team, because outside of startups, where in a startup, the same person can be doing the design and the research, so it's all in one person's head. But in bigger organizations, the team communication of interpreting findings into action items for design is the challenge.
Right. So we have a couple of questions. I can combine those, like Nandini and Anurag asking similar questions, like where do you learn from LX design, and what are the other areas we can apply it? Right.
Yeah, so I'll just put it in the chat. lxd.org is a great resource. The origins of experience design are in Europe, actually, in the European design industry. And there it's like very acceptable. Like in the US, we're seeing now in job descriptions that say learning experience design, instructional designer, or whatever, online learning assistant, all these like random names, and the description is the same. So there's a bit of confusion in the US, but in Europe, and I'll also share, I think it might answer a lot of questions for people. I wrote this article on like the difference between UX design, LX design, and instructional design. So I'll just very quickly share it. And so, like, if anyone's interested, one of the big differentiators with UX design is also the origin. Again, it started in HCI. It started with when computers were new. And learning experience design, I think it's older. It wasn't called LX, but education has been around longer than computer-based technology. And so I'll put this article in the chat. It has like more detailed discussion about it.
Yes. One more, there is one question from Vani, like she was asking about what about focus groups with kids? Like, what is, could you please share the experience about focus groups?
Yeah, so with younger kids, I kind of find it hard because it's hard for even a single child to focus. So like focus as a group is such a challenge to have all of them stay on point. They just like, it just becomes like informal, like hangout session. And so like, if you do need to do a focus group, I would recommend that always have like some sort of familiar, like not scary, but some sort of authority figure, like their teacher or their parent, who they will listen to, right? So some moderators, if you have help from, the researcher alone might be really difficult if it's a large group. But yeah, I think for me, the smaller group interviews kind of act as focus groups, because the way it happens in focus group, right? You put out a question and people start building off of each other's opinions, and they have this back and forth, and you see a group dialogue. And so I would just recommend, if you are considering a focus group, think of a smaller group and invite some familiar moderators.
Right. I think that will be a real challenge to control all these kids.
Right.
So just last question I have. Like, what is the future here? Like, because technology is growing. We have a lot of AR in even gaming industry where VR, mixed reality, or reality. So with say adult, I can understand we can learn technologies and we can use this. As you already mentioned that in one example that you shared, Myro and kids like they are very quickly adopt these things. So as as we're going in future, what you see here, like how technologies and how much technology we can put in front of kids, basically, because there is always technology has a pros and cons. So how much you feel as a, how much technology we can expose to these young growing brains, like, what is your, like?
I think for me, I predict that the challenge is going to be opposite. The challenge is going to be for the adults because children adapt so quickly. Like even though I come from a game design background and I have played Minecraft and Roblox and all the like the traditional games that kids play today, or even like coding in Scratch, I'm familiar. But that at this point, I kind of feel like a 13-year-old has surpassed me in every way possible. So even
Okay.
for a professional gamer, I can keep up. And metaverse, sure, like metaverse, everyone's talking about it. It isn't fully here. It exists in like pieces here and there. But the closest thing to like a connected experience of a metaverse is kind of like Nike launched their new line of shoes with an experience in Roblox, a VR experience. And
Right.
like I've heard about it and I tried it, but I didn't understand it. But there are so many kids who have attended concerts in Roblox, who have bought shoes, like real life shoes on Roblox. I have no clue how that works. And
Okay.
like NFTs, for instance, right? Like I went to the farmer's market and there was like a 14-year-old selling her drawings. And I was like, okay, I want to support your art. And she was like, no, this is an NFT. Can you like use her? Like,
Oh,
so this, so like there's like kids are advanced, like you never know. And even in like countries where you think that maybe technology is not so advanced, like I've seen a lot of young entrepreneurs being really advanced with technology. And so I predict that it will be harder to moderate these spaces because the caregivers are themselves not fully aware how to, like they wouldn't even understand. Like my mom could come into my room and say, hey, enough internet, just stop it now. I
right.
can't yell that anymore. Like it's so much beyond internet now, right? So I think moving forward, there should be education for caregivers and educators to kind of catch up to what the kids know and what they do.
Correct. I think, and this will again, for young UX designer, this is a huge opportunity. So they can explore so many things, even job opportunities, and they can test them. Because, and yes, great. I think this topic will be absolutely endless topic, and I don't want to take Sunday's time. But again, thanks Sonia for giving us time. I think it's a very this topic itself is I think it is a very fresh, because typically in UX, IT, corporate, everywhere, people are try to do a traditional things. Okay? But still, I think this is explore. You can connect with uh, Sonia on LinkedIn. Definitely, there are a lot of things she has doing. Follow her website and everything, and move. That you can learn so many things from her. I know today is in 1 hour how much we can cover, but definitely we try some specific things in future, and we can have some kind of more activities uh, we can plan. Thanks everyone for joining this. So today we cover very interesting topic. Similarly, we have a next our UX talk, which is on accessibility for web and mobile. And speaker is it is from it is like from Delhi. He's a Mayank Sinha. He's a well experienced designer in digital Airtel. Uh, Thanks again, everyone. Looking forward to connect and hope everyone find this session is very. And Sonia, I think you have covered so many things in less time, and that is very wonderful. Thanks once again, and hope participants have got really good insight. At least they have changed the approach in a typical designing and LX design and kids. That is. Thanks. Have a great Sunday, everyone. And stay tuned for more such topics, and we'll try to cover more and more in designs. Thanks, everybody. Bye.